Welcome to this special episode on the future of physiotherapy, where we're exploring how the next generation is influencing the shape of the profession. I'm Ellen Webber, General Manager of Education at the Australian Physiotherapy Association, and today I'm joined by two incredible guests who in many ways represent the two ends of the spectrum and the bridge between them. John Fitzgerald joins us today, and he's an APA titled sports physiotherapist and founder and CEO of Active Rehabilitation Physiotherapy, which also has its own research foundation. John's also a mentor to countless students, graduates and clinicians, as in his role as adjunct professor at the University of Queensland, and he's a member of their Curriculum Consultative Committee for Physiotherapy. We're also joined by Calum Neish, who's graduated just last year. He's already making waves as a researcher and advocate for inclusive, gender-affirming and culturally responsive physiotherapy. And recently, in 2023, was awarded the APA Board of Directors Student Prize, being a winner there, which is really exciting. And he's also our early career voice on the APA National Advisory Council. So together today, we'll unpack the Next Gen white paper, recently launched just this week at the APAS 25, which is our profession's roadmap for the next decade, and talk candidly about what we need to do differently to thrive in a Gen Z future. So let's jump in. Let's start with the big picture view. When you each think about the future of physiotherapy, what excites you the most?
I think there's a lot of things that are really exciting. I think we're hearing at the conference this year about different technologies and innovation, digital health. But I think some of those things about going away from a reactive injury treatment view, but looking at those proactive, preventative health mechanisms. And we know there's falls prevention, we've got an aging population. So those things I think are really exciting, how we're going to be able to harness our full scope to really help with preventative health.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's part of what I would have replied to as well. My most exciting thing, and the reason that I go to work every day still, is that we're still attracting this wonderful, lovely, intelligent, caring people. We've just done our new grad interviews for next year, and we just met so many lovely people and we would have been glad to employ any of them, you know. I guess also I'm excited that we're expanding our understanding and our scope of practice, and the opportunity to contribute to all the future problems. There's men's health, women's health, the chronic burden of disease in Australia, and opportunity to do it throughout the world, as we're trying to do in Timor-Leste as well. So
it's so exciting to see how the next gen can really influence where physiotherapy does take us. I'm interested, you've both contributed significantly to the development of the white paper. It's a really exciting time to be looking at this really intentionally. I'd love to hear from you both around, what does the next gen white paper mean to you both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think it's seeing this tangible document that represents and has clearly been co-designed and had consultation from new grads and students and early career physiotherapists, as well as experts in education, I think felt really seen and heard. And so seeing that these are the kind of problems that we are facing, that we may be facing into the future, I think personally it was this realization that, okay, cool, we've got something laid down, we've got a bit of a framework of where we might go. And so professionally then, because I think it's difficult at the moment, I'm trying to work out how I'm going to be separating this personal identity, but then also professional identity as a physiotherapist. And so I think it all kind of melds into just feeling really seen.
Fantastic to hear that the voice of students and new grads is, so visible in the white paper. And, interested, John, in your perspective, given Calum's view around, being seen and heard, how does that relate to your experience in supporting, students and new grads?
Oh yeah, exactly. It's very important that we do that. I think personally from the white paper, it doesn't affect me that much because, as you just declared, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I never thought of myself like that before, but I am at the other end of the spectrum. Professionally, I am delighted that it's actually happened. I think it's a fantastic piece of work. And I guess since I've become a bit more strategic in the way I like to do this in creating a legacy and educating and looking after the next generation of physios, that I think the white paper has pretty well included everything that I thought should have been in there. Mm-hmm. So it's just fantastic to see it all come together so well. And it's been a culmination of talks that I've heard and also presented in the last few national physio conferences. So everyone's coming together and realising this is the way we need to do the future. There's still some hard conversations to have because I think the current model in some of the smaller businesses is not sustainable. So I think the white paper seeks to address a lot of that, but there's no sort of tangible way out unless we make some harder decisions with our business models.
And look, I think before sort of looking at what that roadmap is ahead, really interested to look back and see how far that we've come. So for you, John, you've seen the profession evolve from manual therapy and hospital-based care to digital health, private practice models and multidisciplinary teams. What's been the biggest shift from your perspective?
I guess that's my turn because I'm at the other end of the spectrum. It's been enormous. It's 42 years now. The first answer that came to mind was the gender balance, how that's changed. So in my year, there was 9 men and 90 ladies. So that's gone now to about 60-40, I think. And I know one of our older physios, and in his year he had three men and about 60 girls. So that gender balance has changed enormously. It's such a huge shift to reflect back on it in the 40 years. So evidence-based practice has become the norm, and we're more research-based. So that's fantastic. The direct access, the self-referral thing has just come in my generation. So that was huge for world physio, particularly in Australia. The extended scope, advanced scope stuff, that just did not exist in my first 20 years or so as a physio, so that's pretty exciting. The whole pain science, that wasn't a thing either. Vestibular physio didn't exist, wasn't a thing. I guess the digital methods is the main thing, the delivery methods, the way we can do telehealth. COVID, really bumped that over the line for us now. It's got solid evidence. We use it, it's an everyday part of our life now. And we did about 5,500 telehealth consultations this year and last year as well. Use of data, PROMs, the whole health IT documentation, the governance structure, it's just come ahead enormously. It's just amazing. So it's been, when you look back at it, it's wonderful to think that that's happened, but it's just sort of happened progressively. So it hasn't been that hard. It's just been part of life, I guess. You have to constantly assume that you have to adapt to change. Yeah, I think that flexibility in your brain is the thing's going to change constantly, which is why we tell our younger grades things will change constantly and you have to adapt.
Yeah, change is the only constant.
Yes.
And it's interesting to hear how far it's evolved and the opportunity for the profession to continue to adapt. And so this roadmap really is exciting in terms of creating that pathway forward. But of course, there's going to be the unexpected as well along the way, as we've experienced. So reflecting on your career, what do you think we've gained or perhaps lost along the way?
We've gained the breadth of the profession is enormous now, as I've sort of just mentioned. The respect for the profession, particularly amongst medical practitioners, specialists, and the public profile, the respect. GPs are the most, we've had that paper recently saying GPs trust physios. The biggest thing, of course, is computers, the internet. The computers and internet did not exist in my first 10 years as physio, which might seem hard to believe, but it just wasn't a thing.
I remember those days, but Calum might not.
Oh, look, I've had to fax things at work, and they're like, what am I doing?
Well, it's great to hear you know what a fax is. I heard a great example at one of our sessions today that someone didn't. So, it is.
It's a learning curve.
It's a learning curve.
Yeah. So that is unbelievable. I remember when the very first mobile phones came out, and it was this big, and I had to have a battery pack in my back pocket and carry it around with me. And that was only 1989 or something, I think. So yeah. That's the biggest, I guess, gain. The loss, I think the biggest loss and potential loss is the manual therapy and the risk of losing that privilege of touch. I guess those that have been physios for a long time, we know we've had the privilege of touch and we know how well manual therapy can work. Even though there's some debate about it, for some reason I don't understand. Maybe just the research hasn't been done. But, it just works, and we can't lose that. It's the as I said, it's a privilege, but it's also the defining factor between us and some of the other professions. So there's certainly that. And I do feel that we are certainly losing some resilience. Things are different, and we have physios coming to us now, in particular students and new grads, and they're asking interviews at the questions at interviews, about burnout and mental health and that sort of thing. And I'm glad that they're asking the questions, but it's sad that they have to be aware of it, I think, as well,
I'm interested in sort of coming back to the point you're making around manual therapy. And Calum, I'd love to hear your perspective and your experience in terms of how that's seen amongst your peers. Is there a view that manual therapy should be a priority? What thoughts have you got around that?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one, I think, because I started my undergraduate training as COVID hit. And so we lost some of that kind of contact time and ability to, there's no way I can practice my manual therapy techniques on a teddy bear or on my dog, which was some of the recommendations. It's that's not going to translate. And then I'm there and doing a prac exam, doing that on a teddy bear. I'm yes, I've got my skills. That's challenging. And I think that's something that people have recognized across employers and we've recognized as well. And I think we do see the value, but I think there definitely was maybe an initial shift of people exercise. But I 100% agree that as a profession, we come from that touch and that body, and that's so important. And so I think how we're going to address that coming from that those skills just haven't been developed as well, and I'm completely aware of that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that perspective.
Yeah, and I think as employers, we need to recognise that. So we certainly do. We certainly put all our younger grads through our own training program when they get to outpatient. So
You're not using simulation with teddy bears.
It's not quite the same.
Not quite the same. No, I can imagine. And John, just thinking again about your experience. How do you see the next generation's approach to career and purpose compared with your early days?
Yeah, I think the values of why we're physios and why we do it, the purpose, I don't think that's changed much, to be honest. We all do it because we care about people, and that's the sort of profession that we want to be in. So I don't think that value thing has changed much. Yeah.
Calum, I'm interested in your thought around, is the generational divide as big as people think? Or are the values actually aligned more, perhaps, than we give it credit for?
I think possibly. I think maybe we're a little bit more outspoken about it, perhaps. And I think definitely there'll always be ends of a spectrum of people wanting not to work as much, or maybe wanting to work a lot and a lot. And both obviously come with their risks, and for everyone and all the stakeholders. I think Jill Hicks, who did the opening keynote, she mentioned, if she was to talk to herself 20 years ago or whatever it was, that she would say work less. Obviously, that's not always realistic, and I completely respect that. But I think we're trying to, how do we work out how, and I don't think just my generation, but across a lot of people, how we can really balance work and life, while still, of course, knowing that a lot of people come to a point where they're like, well, no, physiotherapy is actually a really big part of my identity professionally, and then it comes into other aspects of their life. So I think it is a little bit not as much of a divide as perhaps we think.
Yeah. And look, one of the things I've been hearing this week at APAS 25 is it's not about work-life balance, it's about life. Work is part of life, people's professional identity are a part of that as well. John, your thoughts, in terms of, how you and your peers and colleagues see that work-life balance. Is there something we can borrow from the younger generation's view
Absolutely.
around this?
Absolutely. I think I mentioned in the panel yesterday that I had worked too hard, and many of my colleagues would say the same thing, but that was just a fact. That's the way we did it back then. But now that I'm at the other end of my spectrum of my career, I realise that it would have been nice to not do that. It's really hard now, though, because the cost of living is so hard. If you want to buy a house and you don't want to work as much, that's really hard. And I don't have the answer to that. We had our 40-year reunion a couple of years ago, and over half our cohort came, and nearly all of them had stayed in physio as a career. Hardly any had changed. I think only one had changed. My son's year physio, 10 years ago now, he had 9, I think, pretty close friends, and I think only one of them is still a physio, and the rest of them are mostly doctors. So there's that change. So our cohort, we had a career, and that was our career, and we just accepted that it was a career. We didn't want for anything else, and the cost of living was different back then as well. But now people change. So I think that's the biggest generational thing that I see, and I actually think it's a good thing. So we went through a process. It's taken us about a year, and we've pretty well gone through. We've got 138 staff now, I think, team members, and we've gone through everyone and said, what's your utopia? And we've tried to work to that. It's been really hard to balance it, but we've got a really happy team, and we've tried to pay them as much as we possibly can, and we've told them this is what we can do. It's the max we can give you. So we've tried really hard to work at that. I guess we can control that because we're a private business. It's a bit harder in the public system to do that, or in smaller practices. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and look, I want to pick up on something you just said around, people that have been in the profession for a long time have stuck in it. We know that there is this sort of 5 to 7 year point where people are exiting the profession. What can we be doing now to better support retention in the profession that links with, what we've learned through the white paper process as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
I think there's, and it's highlighted in the white paper, there's a lot of reasons why there's that, maybe that 5 to 7, or there's that issue with workforce retention. And so whether it's recognition, remuneration, whether it's, adequate career pathway, and well, those are some of the things that, the career pathway the APA does have. And so really trying to solidify that, working at the top of scope and things like that, I think are potential solutions. But people may want like more hybrid working roles where they're looking at clinical, but also leadership, research, and then how can that be incorporated into practice, and understanding there's going to be challenges across different sectors. But then also, and John's kind of already alluded to, like, flexibility in terms of, maybe they're doing different working hours and things like that that might work best for them in their, family life or their work life.
And so from sort of the perspective of an employer, what practical steps are you taking to create those sorts of environments where people can have diverse careers in physiotherapy, recognising that, academics, for example, can find it hard to carve out time for research or for supporting, through teaching and learning. What does that look like?
It's you have to be very adaptable. You have to think on your feet the whole time. I think at the core of it is we have to treat people as individuals, and part of that is not just the personal characteristics, but the way that we mentor them. So we have a formal mentoring program, which is basically twice a year we meet, and it's more than just this is how you treat a patient. It's a personal thing. It's about what are you doing, what do you like, what don't you like, and where do you want to go to. We do all that together as a team. Over the course of about a month, twice a year, and then we get together and see if there's any common themes, and then when we do our recruiting, we try and plan and head people to where they want to go to. So I think that's an important thing. I think the other really important thing, and we've developed it, and again I spoke about this in the panel yesterday, that it's really hard, it's really important not to burn people out in the first couple of years. And I think if you go into a practice where you're expected to produce income and you're being paid a percentage, and there's huge financial pressure on you, when we all know in retrospect that in the first 2 or 3 years you actually don't know much, and it probably takes you 10 years to be a really good physio. So just take the pressure off financially, take the pressure off trying to see lots of numbers, give people a well-rounded career and get them to settle in first. And then we can do that because we're a large practice, but we did that on purpose because I realised that what we were doing wasn't going to work for us. So we had to expand and we had to strategise in order to give people different opportunities, otherwise they were going to leave and go elsewhere. So that's a big part of what we did. Yeah.
Well, some really practical strategies there that people can start to think about in terms of how they approach their employment strategies.
Yes, and if you do that with the younger people, it's a win-win as well, because it mitigates risk for us as well, because by the time people get to the more difficult patients, they're more experienced. And mitigates risk, and it also it gives people a general well-roundedness in their career. And if you're experienced across lots of different areas, it makes you a better outpatient musc physio anyway.
And we do hear about in the Next Gen white paper that cliff people feel that they're sort of falling off from when they, exit the university environment and head into clinical practice. So scaffolding and supporting through those first couple of years sounds so incredibly important.
Yeah, and just picking up on what Calum said, leadership opportunities. So we actually have our own leadership program, but not everyone wants to be a leader. So we have some fantastic people that we would like to be leaders, but they don't want to know about it, and that's fine. But you have to understand that. So we, as part of that mentoring, we pick up on that. So we've got clinical leaders. We also have team leaders, like people leaders. We have business leaders, and try and give people that mix as they want. And it's worked out better for us doing that way as well, in unexpected ways, in that those people, when there's a crisis in terms of sickness, which we've had nearly every day for 5 years now, people can jump roles. So those who are doing more business can jump in and jump on the tools and go between practices. So it's been an unexpected bonus for us to do that.
And fantastic to hear leadership being conceptualised, not just sort of as staff management, because each of us can be leaders in our roles, irrespective of that. So great to hear.
Yeah, as we discussed yesterday, it's the same with education. Education is it's a formal pathway. If you want to be an educator, you should be taught how to be an educator. So,
yes, it's not an innate skill, it's a learned one.
No.
So Calum, thinking about looking forward and hearing more around the perspectives of the Next Gen and graduates coming through at the moment, as someone who's just entering the workforce, what would you say feels most exciting, but also what feels really confronting about the profession right now?
So I think it's really exciting, as someone who's just recently entered the profession, really trying to hone and develop my foundational clinical skills. And I think that's paramount. And trying to, really be authentic in the way I'm doing that as well. I think that's something we're really value driven as a generation as well. And so I think that's at the forefront of my mind. I think it's difficult sometimes to think too far in the future. And that's why I have engaged in the APA mentoring program, where I've been what am I doing? I'm still trying to work out, just how to really develop those basic and foundational skills. And so I think, that's definitely exciting, but it definitely is, confronting at times as well, because there's so much sometimes that I want to do. And I'm so wary, and like John said, that burnout is on my mind. I'm how do I avoid that? And there's compassion fatigue, there's burnout, there's these different things that I'm but also how do I monitor that? And so that's, I think, I've got supervisors at work clinically and professionally, but then having a mentor, I think that's something that has helped mitigate one of those challenges, I hope, and I'll keep, tracking that as I go. But I definitely think, and I'm, worried about, retention and things going forward as well, because it means that, a lot of staff that I work with, we're under the pump, and it's difficult when there is a lot of emergent, sick leave and things like that, because we're stretched thin sometimes. And so that definitely becomes a challenge as well.
Yeah, look, thank you for sharing that. And burnout is, it is a real experience a lot of people are going through, irrespective of their generation, I think. And it's, so important that we recognise resilience is finite, but also that resilience isn't the only thing in terms of how we support people. A lot of the structural changes that we need to introduce to be able to address burnout and support people to build their resilience is so important. And these sorts of conversations and understanding how we can change the structures within the ways that we support our teams, in practice and in the hospital setting, is a big part of being able to address burnout. So really good to hear that example. Thank you, Calum. So look, Gen Z is often described as values-driven and purpose-focused. How does that show up in how you and your peers approach your careers?
Yeah, I think I've already touched on how we're really focused on life, as you kind of mentioned. It's, was it work-life balance? Was it just trying to live our lives? But I think we're looking at how our care can be, like I said, a bit authentic, it's inclusive, and it's accessible. And so I think that's something that's on our mind a lot, and going into seeing clients every day as individuals. And I think that's obviously so important and paramount. But I think it really just comes down to that. But everyone's so different. I think it's really hard to group all of us and say that we're all going to have different values. And so some of us will, I mentioned the term on the panel of this movement called quiet quitting. I think it's not something I necessarily agree with, because it's it doesn't have a good rap, but everyone's going to be so different. So I think that's difficult in itself.
Yeah, and look, I think it's an important note there in terms of not generalising and not assuming that everyone, in a single generation is going to have the same values and views.
Yeah.
I think we can easily slip into those sort of spaces. So what I was interested in sort of hearing your perspective on, you've done some research around inclusivity and cultural safety, and recognising that the Physio Council is recently updated its quality standards for universities, and we see students emerging from the uni environment pretty well equipped around cultural safety and thinking around inclusivity within the workplace. Then entering the workplace, perhaps, the opportunities to learn, amongst the more senior people that they're going to be working with. I was just really interested to hear your perspective around, how do you think physiotherapy can better reflect the communities it serves, with that experience that you've had, through your own learning and research as well?
Yeah, it's already been touched on, but I think it really is just seeing the individual before you as an individual, and not generalizing, because everyone's experiences, their cultures, their spiritualities is all going to be so different, and their experiences will shape how they will come to you into the practice. And so I think approaching things with general curiosity, being understanding, if you can have some basic understanding and going through training. And so, the Australian Physiotherapy Council has cultural safety training, which is really, really excellent. But there's so many other different institutes on, like, clinical yarning, for instance, if we're talking about First Nations mobs. But then if we're looking at LGBTQI plus training as well, there's the APA educational module in that as well. And so I think if you view that as something that's a continual learning process, but then being, very reflective, and I think reflective practice is something that's, incredibly important, not just as an early career physio, but ongoing. I think if you're taking those as puzzle pieces, but then continually building that as you grow, I think that's just how it has to be.
And an important cue I'm going to pick up there around critical reflection, and recognising that critical reflection is actually a skill that does require honing and learning, and there are really great structures and theories out there, and encourage all of our listeners to go out and learn more in this space. It's certainly something I've picked up throughout the conference this week, is the importance of critical reflection in honing your not only your clinical skills, but also how you engage with patients, and particularly in the cultural safety space. John, I'd love to hear from your perspective. How do you see that showing up in your setting, and how are you finding consideration around diversity, inclusion, and cultural safety looking like in your environment?
Yeah, I guess our key thing, straight back to what I said before, we treat people as individuals. Yeah. We work really hard as a team, as an executive team, to create a safe space, and we've got a whole bunch of cultural things in place where people are encouraged to speak out. And I guess we all know that at different times we're all going to have a crisis. Something's going to go wrong with all of us, not just the younger people. So we have to be reflective of that. And we one of our interview questions actually is, if something's going wrong or you're struggling, how would we know? So we expect people, people have different cues to do things. So and that's part of the leadership program that we do. That we certainly get our leaders to be the keepers of the culture and the mentors and the safe spots for our team to go to. I think, in the big scheme of things, I'm not really worried about Gen Z. I think they're doing a good job and they're sorting themselves out. And I was just thinking about this the other day. We have a band that we put together for the Christmas party. And so a lot of Gen Z play. They're really good musicians. So 5 of the 6 members of the band are Gen Z, and I'm the only one who's not. And I was looking at them the other day when we were practicing, and I was thinking, well, they're also culturally diverse. One's from Hong Kong, one's from Iran, one's from South Africa, one's from Timor-Leste. And I just think, oh, well, without it even happening, it's just happened. And I think it's just because we treat people as individuals, and when they apply for jobs, we just include nice people. We try and gather nice people together. And I think if we take that attitude through, it sort of sorts itself out. And you'll create your own identity as a Gen anyway because you'll be taking over. So.
How brilliant. I hope there's a little video of that Christmas band. I'd love to see that.
It didn't sound real good.
We can do a battle of the bands.
Oh, it's fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. It's so true. Look, in sort of wrapping up our conversation, I'd really love to hear perspectives around, if tomorrow we could redesign the physiotherapy pathway from scratch for the next 10 years, what do you think you might change first?
A couple of things. There are better student placements. It's really hard for the students, particularly since COVID, to have really good student placements. And there's so many physio schools now that they're all battling for student placements. And so one of the things that we really need is to get better placements in private practice. And at the moment, we're restricted by private health insurers and by the compensables who won't actually allow people in private practice to be able to access the funding for that if the students treat them. So that's really hard. So we need and I've spoken with the APA about it, but they really need to advocate to the private health insurers and to the compensables that students can be part of a treatment. And actually it's a benefit because the patients will get longer treatments supervised by their senior clinicians. So I think that's a really big one. And the CP DANs need to be a part of that as well. And we've had these discussions many times over the 10 years, but I think, that I went to my first CP DANs and it'd be nice if something actually happened now. And as we've alluded to, I really like the idea of an intern year. So somewhere at the end, or somehow, I don't know how, it's already 4 years, where everybody can get exposure to hospital and everyone can get some exposure to private practice in an ideal world. Yeah.
Just picking up on that, and the white paper does explore this concept of an internship year, and one of the complexities in being able to introduce something like that is the variability in the professional clinical learning environment for physios in terms of, you've got everything from your single shingle through to your complex public health environments. And a big part of how that would succeed is models of supervision, and maybe supervision's not the right word, but how, younger or more junior physios are supported through their early years. What thoughts and ideas have you got around how we can introduce those sort of flexible models of supervision or support and create an environment where we can, introduce something like an internship year? I'd love to sort of hear any thoughts you've got around that.
Yeah, we have discussed this briefly, but we can't do it as we currently are. It has to be a job share, I think. We're able to do job shares at our work because we have the hospital, private hospital, public hospital, and outpatient practices, so we can do that ourselves, but not everyone has access to that. But if there was an openness somehow between the public system and the private practices to be able to do a job share in the future as an actual job, not just as an intern, but you'd start as an intern, I guess, where we could share those resources. I would really like to see that. We as a business contract to the public hospitals to do some of their work. So there's no reason why public hospitals couldn't, like they've got wait lists in outpatients in particular, and long wait lists with screening clinics, so if there could be some way politically we could sort that out, I think it would be a win-win for the clients, for the patients that are on wait lists as well.
So that can be on the wish list for this new model that we're designing.
Yeah.
So Calum, from your perspective, if we could design it from scratch tomorrow for the next 10 years, what would you like to change first?
I think the idea of an internship model does sound quite interesting. I'm intrigued. Understanding that, 4 years is a decent amount of time if you're doing an undergraduate degree, but what could that look like if it was to be restructured to include an internship year? I think if it means that people are then feeling more supported going into practice, I think that's a win. And I think people would get on board with that if they realise that not just themselves, but then employers and other stakeholders are realising that people are feeling more supported, more confident, not necessarily, confident versus competence, but going into that with less of dread or feeling like they're on a cliff. Is it a graduate program, structured graduate program with supervision, clinically, professionally, with mentorship as well? I think difficult then as well, how is that going to look across Australia, across metro, across rural, regional, remote? I think there's those challenges as well, because I think I've heard of different models similar to what John mentioned, where maybe in like a rural community they may have contracted a private, to then also service sometimes into the hospital or the public system there. But what does that look like for it's just going to be interesting.
I think telehealth will open up a bunch of those opportunities.
Well, amazing sort of concept there, and some complexity in being able to roll something like that out. With goodwill behind it, that might be something that we can start to explore.
Yeah.
So, in sort of wrapping up now, I'd love to hear your thoughts from each of you around, if you could give one piece of advice to the next gen of physios, what would it be?
Well, as part of the next gen, I suppose, I think keep trying.
Yeah.
Just keep going, but work out how you can set boundaries while still obviously fulfilling your role requirements. Don't go lying flat, which is another movement in China, which is similar to quiet quitting. But I think, if we're cultivating and fostering our own well-being, that's going to translate to practice as well. And so I think look after yourselves, but keep going for it and creating meaningful interactions with clients.
I think we can all take something away from that. Thank you, Calum. John, the final word.
And I tell this to all our younger guys is when you're struggling, take the stress off yourself and think about the patient. If you focus on somebody else, you actually take the stress off and you feel better about yourself. And then it's up to the patient then whether they accept the advice that you give them. You might give your best treatment and they don't take the advice. But nonetheless, you've got to do your best, and it's up to the patient then if they choose to follow that path or not. And don't lose sleep over it. And it's just do your best, forget the rest, and then you'll sleep well at night time.
Our opening keynote speaker at APAS 25 was Jill Hicks, and one thing that really resonated for me was that sentiment that her mother gave her around trust yourself, and I think there's real strength in that as well. Well, look, I just want to say thank you to you both. It's been such rich conversation today, and really appreciate you bringing your insights and your honesty to the discussion. So look, for anyone listening, you can explore these ideas further in the Next Gen White Paper, which is now on the APA website. And just want to thank you for joining us. And here's to the next generation shaping the future of physiotherapy.
Thanks, Calum.
Thanks, Calum.